It's just recording.
We're live.
Okay, we're live. Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you on this beautiful Monday. It's 8 p.m. We are joining from Clearwater, Florida. We're engaging in session 155 of Roadmap for a Moral Society. With that said, we welcome all of you who are just joining as we are discussing fundamental verities that we believe are important to create this ever advancing civilization that's built on peace, justice, and of course, one that requires your hope, because hope is what, if we truly have faith, is what guides our way as we try to put these teachings that we have in front of us into practice. Having said that, we have this on the screen. We're going to be beginning once more after we start with our opening prayer. We begin with an opening prayer to set the spiritual mood as we are all trying to come from various viewpoints. We're remembering our common purpose, and that is seeking truth and trying to learn from one another as we discuss and share our personal opinions, our personal perspectives. Here we are, we begin. Armin, I believe you volunteered to say our
Also,
Right.
lauded be thy name, O Lord my God. I entreat thee by thy name, through which the hour hath struck and the resurrection came to pass. And fear and trembling seized all that are in heaven and all that are on earth, to rain down out of the heaven of thy mercy and the clouds of thy tender compassion what will gladden the hearts of thy servants, who have turned toward thee and held thy cause. Keep safe thy servants and thy handmaidens, O my Lord, from the darts of idle fancy and vain imagining, and give them from the hands of thy grace the draught of the soft flowing waters of thy knowledge. Thou truly art the Almighty, the most exalted, the ever forgiving, the most generous. Paula.
Thank you very much. We're going to start with all being, whether universal or particular, are mutually connected. All right.
I have a question. Was that covered up the bottom right where it said mutually connected for anyone else, or is it just me?
What do you mean?
It's
saying
just
that-
you. I see it all.
It's fine.
So for the YouTube, does the person show on the top right, left, bottom?
No, no one's being. It's entirely just the screen.
Okay, so it's all visible. Just making sure.
Yeah.
Okay, it's my screen then.
All right. So let's read.
Okay, you need a volunteer.
Go ahead.
In sum, all beings, whether universal or particular, are mutually connected in accordance with God's consummate wisdom and mutually influence one another. Were it not so, the all-embracing organization and universal arrangement of existence would become disordered and disrupted. And as all created things are most soundly connected one with another, they are well ordered, arranged, and perfected.
I want to
Okay.
ask a question about this, an open
Sure.
question, if I may. It's very important because a lot of people are looking at humans and matter and all being in the existence that we see from a lot of different perspectives. But I'm just going to ask a basic question because we understand our universe a lot more than we used to just 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. Humans, we're all interconnected. Inside even our own bodies, we're learning that we require certain things to live inside us for us to remain healthy. Our gut biome, they call it, or the bacteria, the good bacteria that live inside us. If we don't have enough of that, we could get sick and die. There's a lot to consider, but in short, we are symbiotes. We have a symbiotic process within our human bodies that require us to live, to breathe good air. We have to rely on all the organisms that help produce and clean the air, so on and so forth. So we're all connected in such a way that if we destabilize the environment that is what our home, our earth, our environment, all the animals and the plants that live there that produce our atmosphere as we know it, that we can breathe clean air, and so on. I just want to point one thing out. It's a question now. We know that there's so much in the world that we don't know, but the very little that we do know is that we rely on other living things to live. We eat other living things, or they were once living. I have in front of me soybean edamame from a tree. I have, different different forms, be it fruit, be it stuff that came from wheat that got turned into bread-like substance they call noodles. All these different things that we rely upon, beings that we rely upon. So I want to ask this question about this mutually connected in accordance with God's consummate wisdom and mutually influence one another. So the idea of mutual influence, I think we can look around us and see it's well established, but how do we understand, how can we discuss this with our friends that are maybe thinking of God in all things? They don't see a creator that created our universe. They see that we have possibly God in all of us, or there's God in nothing. There is no God. My question is, in speaking about this wisdom of an intelligent design for creation, how do we make, without this being just fundamentally an assumption and something we just have faith in, how do we make this connection? Or does anyone have an idea to assist us to understand, yes, things are connected. There's a symbiotic relationship that we all have, be it humans inside themselves or humans with the environment around us. How do we draw this connection to our creator that created us?
Well, first of all, let's start with how evolution started. You had a single cell, basically living being that was created. And of course, this process through evolutionary environment created other species, and when the land became available, they walked on the land and they propagated. So from basically this process of evolution was built into the system, ecosystem that today we have. Now we started from mineral. Once the elements became available, these single cell organisms were created, and eventually they moved to the from ocean to the land. And of course, plants existed in the ocean as well. And of course, the animals, through evolutionary process, they created, and when the condition became ready, humans appeared, which is distinct from animals and plants and minerals. So that's really the chain. What we're discussing here, interrelationship. So about 94% of our DNA is shared with the tree. So that tells you that the process, or almost cellularly, we have exact 100% cells of a chimpanzee. So the question again is, this is what is linking us to other living being.
So we may be
animal
linked in terms of being similar to one another. However, this mutual influence upon one another, this intelligent design of creation.
Yeah, let's
how
get
do we
to
explain that?
Yeah. No, of course, you have the plant feeds from minerals and then flourishes and propagates through evolutionary process. And then the animals eat the plants and eat other animals, and that's how they progress. And then, of course, man takes advantage of the minerals, plants, and animals, and propagates and to the stage that we're in. So the question is that these are distinct classes of species that exist within the creation itself that are linked together. So again, you go and poison the ocean, the fish eats the poison, and then you eat the fish. So that's how you're linked, even to the ocean. So
So
the sea
to build
is
on that point about disrupting our world around us, so is it this consummate wisdom of God that we are supposed to respect and obey so that we don't disorder and disrupt our world around us?
that's the whole key. The question is the air that you breathe. Why did they ban basically atomic experiments in the air? Is because eventually the air circulates around the world and it propagates all over the world. So the whole issue that we're discussing here relates to distinct species that exist and they cohabit and coexist on Earth.
So for example, the diatoms that are found in our colder regions in the Arctic that we have that produce about 25% of our fresh breathable air, the oxygen that they create for us, all of us living life forms to breathe, that would be an example of if we cause a disruption, we kill them ultimately by causing the water to be poisoned, then there will be less fresh air for us to breathe, right?
Of course. So that's the whole concept of integration of the ecosystem. It's fairly obvious, and this picture explains it quite well. So the question again is that if you ban, for example, DDT in United States or Western culture, and you sell the DDT to South American poor countries because it's effective and cheap, and they produce banana and send it here, and you eat the banana. So this is why the system is fully integrated, and you cannot pollute, you cannot harm the environments, and you cannot harm other species because you're dependent on them.
Wait,
And
I
it's
eat a lot
all
of bananas.
integrated.
Is this a thing going on now?
Sorry?
DBT.
Yes. DDT is banned in United States and Western
Yeah,
societies.
it causes eggs to weaken in chickens so they don't survive. But it also causes problems in humans. So are you saying that right now they're still applying onto bananas?
Correct.
Uh-oh, I eat a lot of bananas.
Well, you have to make sure you don't eat the skin at least.
Okay,
Right?
no skin, got it.
Okay. All right, any comments on this one? So the question again goes back to this situation that if the evolution didn't exist, we wouldn't be here. And one species would dominate the entire system. So here, as we know, humans have the only consciousness in this ecosystem, and of course, it's harnessing the power of the universe, basically.
But you did mention just now though, one species dominating the entire humans are dominating the whole system right now.
No, of course,
The
that's
largest
because,
extinction of animals in the world besides, I guess.
correct. But that is again, that's the planned process of creating a human being that can recognize God with his own free will. And that's the purpose of his existence and creating the golden age of civilization. That's their purpose.
And may I ask, I just want to understand this idea of God's consummate wisdom that produces effectively what we would know to be equilibrium of the planet. And these rules that we're supposed to follow, if we don't follow, it causes this disorder or disruption. Is this a way to justify, to explain the need to have everyone consent to following a common set of rules that we claim came from the same God?
Well, obviously there is that's what we claim as Baha'is, that the Holy Spirit, which are those instructions and axioms and laws that come in every thousands or so years, is the model of creating the ever advancing civilization, which is continuation of revelation. So there is one God, one revelation that comes in stages. And that's really where we are today. Any other comments on this? If not, we go to the next. So now we're going to go talk about free will and its limits.
I'll go ahead and
Go ahead.
read it. Okay. Free will and its limits. Question: is man free and unconstrained in all of his actions, or is he compelled and constrained? Answer: this is one of the most important questions of divinity, and it is the most abstruse, God willing, another, and most abstruse. God willing, another day we will explain this matter at length from the beginning of our lunch. For now, we will briefly say a few words as follows. Certain matters are subject to the free will of man, such as acting with justice and fairness, or injustice and iniquity. In other words, the choice of good or evil actions. It is clear and evident that the will of man figures greatly in these actions. But there are certain matters where man is forced and compelled, such as sleep, death, sickness, failing powers, misfortune, and material loss. These are not subject to the will of man, and he is not accountable for them, for he is compelled to endure them. But he is free in the choice of good and evil actions, and it is of his own accord that he performs them.
Okay, so here again, their free will, which is in the action or reaction of the events that the man is engaged with. So here, good and evil. So you can perform through your action, you can perform good, or you can perform evil. So here, so the key of reaction to situation that the man is in is the key in terms of measuring the outcome, whether it was good or bad. So certain matters, obviously, it's every human being is bound to observe, but some may not, but those are anomalies, such as sleep, death, sickness, failing powers, misfortune, and material loss. So here it's very interesting because, for example, economies and condition of the economies are not under power of each individual. So even material loss that you have or misfortune that you can have, you're not responsible for it because you didn't create that condition. You're reacting to it. So this is very interesting. From this, you can tell, for example, you may go bankrupt and without any fault of your own. So here, again, you shouldn't be feeling that you did something wrong, or you could have changed your misfortune to a fortune.
Well, that's a question that I think I want to ask you about, this idea of your responsibility for something that's within your control or not. Respectfully, there's a beautiful show called Good Place. It's, I think, on NBC or CBS, one of those channels. It's called The Good Place with Ted Danson. And towards the end of it, they actually explore this idea of what's considered a good act. And the reason why I'm asking is this is a subject of debate, especially with how complex our world is today. An example being that you buy clothing that it is economically cheaper and maybe your only real economic option if you wish to have multiple pairs of clothing. Yet we all have the option, if we really need to, for moral reasons, not buy that clothing. The reason I say that is we know generally that there are dubious practices that are in play when clothing come from other countries where they use ways to attain labor that is not what we call legal in our country. Some people have even argued that it's slavery, the types of labor that occur to produce the clothing that occurred modern day in sweatshops overseas, in places in the world that people never visit unless they're working in that corporation. So what I wanted to point out was this. We have very clearly a set of moral standards before us, and we know very well that there are actions that are taking place that we are a part of that we could choose not to do. It would just cause severe hardship, or it would cause some form of hardship. My question is it moral for us to not engage in what we think is right with the intention of convenience in mind? So,
Well,
in other words, someone can just go make their own clothing. Yeah, it's very hard, but you can go make your own clothes and not buy clothing from people who you think are committing bad acts, for example.
Yeah, it's very hard to decipher, but the reality of it is that without this exchange of goods and services, albeit the local laws may not protect the workers, but existence or transfer of wealth to third world countries is essential for them to come out of poverty. And we clearly see last century only material basically capitalism created that opportunity to lift humanity out of the poverty that existed in mid 1800s. So the issue is not capitalism. The question of creating a just and equitable method of production of goods and services. So when you're dealing, for example, in Bangladesh, that they're making clothing for probably a large portion of the world, the key really is that the condition that they exist obviously has to be regulated by those people that purchase those goods and services. But you cannot, by not or boycotting those products, you would harm them more than you helping them. Only through regulation you can fix it, where the corporation that is buying these mandates good manufacturing practices and good labor relations within those organizations that they're buying them. Because power of the purse in capitalism is the key of change. Government regulation never worked and never will work. So the corporations that obviously do not adhere to this process, obviously you should shun them. But this issue regarding whether in Bangladesh there are kids that are making less than dollar an hour, and in the sweatshops, you should buy those products, obviously not directly, but to those importers that bring these products in, they should be regulated to make sure that the condition of production of those goods and services are humane, basically, and adheres to the standard of
and that's something we could ask our
product.
lawmakers to do that are here, that the people who are importing these goods are taking care and showing that they've followed standards that are appropriate, right?
Sure, but that's the whole system. Whether good or bad, capitalism is the only system that has survived. We tried many different systems, socialism,
But
capitalism.
the point though is that you've established a point where, with as things are going today, where we are, we can get up and actually do something productive. We can ask our lawmakers to provide for regulation on these industries, regulation to avoid mistreatment of other human beings in
Yeah,
the
they
supply
have those
chain.
laws, but remember, when you put laws, you don't have an integrated police system to make sure that those laws are adhered to overseas, because you have no central world judicial system that can regulate and punish the people that don't comply with it. But the reality is that the corporation that imports can be regulated and exposed in terms of practices that may not be humane in terms of goods and services that are produced. But this issue regarding transfer of wealth only occurs when there is a demand. If you kill the demand, those people will suffer as well.
Yeah, David, I want to say something, if I can. At the museum right now, we're showing the movie produced 1930, Pearl is Back to the Good Earth. And you might just be old enough to remember that movie. We have several Chinese students at our learning site, right? And the discussion is then looking at 1930 China, the movie The Good Earth versus Timu, which has become a well-known, cheap prices out of that part of the world. So the discussion I just want to share amongst the Chinese students was this: was all that the labor is so unreasonably cheap and abusive? But as he said, my mother and my grandmother both worked in those places, and if you suddenly take out the opportunity, even if it's the incredibly insulting wages, they'll starve because there won't be other jobs. So it becomes a moral discussion. And it's very interesting when you see the young Chinese talk amongst each other, how they fear that we have just upped the prices and the rich got richer in this country, and that maybe we are the ones that need to reconsider because we have extreme wealth in comparison to most of the world. And so we make them suffer because of suddenly we have a sense of morality that does not have any humanity engaged with it. I just want to share because we are right in the middle of that conversation. That's why I'm showing the movie The Good Earth, produced in 1930 in China.
No, of course, but you have to realize the Chinese, for example, use because remember, ethics in the Chinese government and the way they're because they don't have any gods and moral standards, although individually they're moral people, but collectively from a government which is communist government, there is no such a thing. So they have done a lot of damage around the world by giving capital to corrupt countries where the money is stolen, and then those countries become in debt to them. So they put factories in those countries, and they literally enslave people because they have no other employment opportunities, and they abuse people. So you see, these are the other side of capitalism. Without regulation, you can create inequities and modern slavery, but which is happening today. And they do it to their own country and their own citizens as well. So these are really issues which only can be solved when you have international tribunal system that regulates these processes and makes sure that goods and services are produced in a human acceptable form. Right now, this doesn't exist. And of course, these are part of the Baha'i economic system in terms of producing goods and services where it's the least cost to produce it. And that's really how the wealth gets transferred, and third world countries will come out of poverty. Instead of going there, pillaging their natural resources, and just live contaminated resources and once is finished. So these are really key elements which the minute you take ethics out of the system itself, obviously starts to get abused. And we see many examples of that today. But this is the whole point, is currently secular societies are trying to move away from religion, which is the source of the ethics, source of the spiritual laws that mandates, not because of increasing the profits or increasing the output, is the question of, remember the first slide that we read, we are all linked together. If somebody suffers in Africa because of famine, it impacts everyone. So if somebody is abused in Bangladesh, a couple of years ago, couple of the actually these garment factories collapsed with people dying in it because they didn't adhere to the construction. So there's a lot of these things going on around the world, and all of it is because they have taken ethics out of the system. And they're worldwide, this secularism and anti-religious doctrine is dominant, and this causes this inequality. And people don't look for the outcome; they just look for the profits, regardless of the damage it causes.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, but as you know, what, a month or so ago, China, Russia, India, Africa, Venezuela, and Brazil just launched on stage with 22 countries on stage the New World Order. Okay, so we're familiar with the term as Baha'i. And the conversation is as of what, a week ago, that they're going to also add their own currency in order to compete with the dollar. So what we're looking at is now a country that obviously have, as you described, no spirituality and cheap labor. And China invests a lot of money in infrastructure in Africa and is looking at Central South America. So right now they have a New World Order without spirituality, and I'm just sharing here at a Baha'i meeting. I said we really need to be able to hold a conversation with our 35-year-olds and under about what's the Baha'i New World Order versus the New World Order that was just recently launched. Good conversation.
No, of course. But remember, this initiative, although it sounds very good on paper, whether it's feasible that can replace dollar, it's a different story. No,
So I have a question about a different aspect of the quote. If I may change our conversation, I want to ask something else relating to the quote, because we talk here about this idea of what we are forced and compelled to endure. And again, we're talking about sleep, death, sickness, failing powers, misfortune, and material loss.
Right.
We are compelled to endure them. However, we have free will in the choice of good and evil actions. If I may so venture, I'm just asking if we can explore these things that we're forced to endure. Again, sleep, death, sickness, failing powers, misfortune, material loss. The way that we endure them is our choice, and the way in which we react to them is where we commit good and evil. Is that correct?
Of course, the question is, in the action, you're subject to society and economic system as well as diseases that you can catch. So the question is how you react to it and overcome is up to you. It's the question of
well, I mean, I'm just gonna say it for what it is.
inevitability.
When I'm sleeping, it's not up to me if I'm alive when I wake up. It's up to everyone around me who makes sure I don't die. You get what I mean?
Not exactly, but the
so
question...
I'm shielded in a house when I'm sleeping. When I'm sleeping, I'm unconscious, and there's no way for me to know if an assassin comes and slits my throat. That's what happened for many millennia. People would get killed in their sleep. Respectfully speaking, people would die because when they're sick, have no one watching over them. But because we have morals, we are allowing, with a society that we rely on, we're allowing ourselves another chance when we fall into these things we cannot control. When we're sleeping, we have family or a safe home and a safe society to avoid any person from just coming in and killing us and stealing our things. We have...
No, I understand. Here, what they're trying to actually expose is the basically attachment to material things. Now, if you follow the doctrine that is explained here, is that the source of passing through these events that can occur, which you have no control, would be much easier and fruitful if you accept them as inevitable and a passing time. And it's not something that is caused by you. Majority of people that fall into depression, actually they say 75% of the females fall into at least once during the year. 35% of male fall into depression. Why is it? It's because they have attachment to material things. And when they don't get what they think that they should have, they fall into depression. But someone that is detached, right? This is from material things, whether they're rich or poor or this more and less in their lives or they're under the weather, they still act the same way, that they don't become depressed. So this is really the key in terms of understanding that's part of the existence, part of life. And it's not something that you attracted to yourself. So these are really clearly shows how one can weather this event that occurs in life, and once they fall, stand up and keep going.
Can I just refer John to the World Order of Baha'u'llah, I think all of this that we're talking about, he's talking about two things. If you're living in a society that doesn't give a damn, how are you safe? Are you safe in your bed? Are you safe wherever? In a careless society. Now, I want to say to you, the prognosis of this, of what is happening today, and we are in the decline, and we need to take it very seriously. The prognosis for this is a cancerous materialism. You know, it affects everything. And the thing is, it is a disease. And also, the fact is that if we want economics to be viable and so on, we have to, and our governments, we have to start looking at electing people into these positions of power that actually have any kind of morality at all, because we as individuals, unless we have a system that is based on moral and ethics, and I refer everybody, I've just come out of a seminar, the World Order of Baha'u'llah, and I'm absolutely, you know, I mean, we can talk for 100 years. It's not going to change anything. The changes have to happen. And the tumult, this what we're going through, each and every country, it's gathering momentum, and we have the remedy. And I would like to say that I have begun again to reread, and I have read many times, The Guardian's exhortations, and I think it's a very good time right now, given the world state, and it is getting worse, it is in a crisis, to begin to look at that and find ways and means of being able to, both in our individual and collective lives, even though that looks pathetic, to try and implement some of the things that we're able to do. You know, and some of those things are really basic. That's like, you know, love thy neighbor as thyself. That's things like caring for other people, just ordinary human things that in a cancerous materialistic society, it's dog eat dog, you know, and competition and jealousies and, you know, the fierceness of that, to be able to act like a human being in that environment. And if you think as Baha'is we are not affected, each and every one of us, please, we are each and every one of us affected. So this quote to me is talking about systems of governance that are failing, economics, systems that are failing. We have a war between the global north and the global south right now, and new relationships forming over that. We have a global mess. So, you know, this to me is a far bigger problem than just an individual one. It's actually a call and a cry for the new world order of Baha'u'llah, you know? So thank you.
Well, of course.
Oh, one last thing, Gilbert, you'll be shocked. The Guardian said that capitalism is evil. It's evil. And I have the reference here. I'll send it to Jeremiah.
No, of course, capitalism without regulation, there is no alternative to it. Obviously, it's evil. And we see this all the time. You know, China sells the base material for fentanyl to Venezuela and Colombia, and they make fentanyl, and they make pills like aspirin or opiate type pills and send it to United States. And they're doing this on purpose. This is not something that they make money at it. They sell tons and tons of the raw material to these countries to make fentanyl and send it. We lose about 100,000.
I'm not going to argue with you, but I think that we're all very, very, at this point in time, this fentanyl, Venezuela, war, oil, the whole thing, the whole system, I think we all need to look after each other and be very, very careful, because things are not what they seem. And I worry about my American Baha'i community because it's right in the brink of it. And I sit here in a little island, wherever else, every day, begging Baha'u'llah to protect each and every believer in America and elsewhere, but particularly America, because, you know, all eyes in the Baha'i world are focused on the vanguard. That's how much we care. We are all in this together. And I'm sorry you don't feel safe in your bed, John, but it's a condition of society. And I know you're saying this, but
just to clarify, I don't feel unsafe. That I trust my society and I trust my family. I was simply saying that there are things out of our control, namely when you're sleeping, that when someone attacks you, if you cannot trust people, that you're going to be harmed.
You can't then that way, John. Well, that way it means that you have you might trust your wife, your family, but when you get outside the door, if you have lawlessness and criminality on your doorstep and you go to bed at night hoping to be safe, you can't be. That's my point. So, not trying to override what you're saying, but the point being this: it is not possible for us to have a safer society until we actually get at the core causes. We can look at all this symptomology for the rest of our lives, and it isn't going to make a blind bit of difference, because the cause of this, the fundamental vicious cause of this, which was given from Europe to North America and to Asia, and they're and it includes many things. Cancerous materialism, and we have a world order that we're either going to swim or sink, that will have, will out of the mess that we are all going to go through arise. Thank you.
We all share that hope, Sharon. We all share that hope that we will arise from these difficulties. And again, thank you for your concern. I just wanted to tell you, thank you for your concern for my well-being. Thank you.
And then I want to add that the drug business wouldn't be such a big business if we weren't so addicted in this country, and under all circumstances are looking to be the buyers. You don't have a seller if you don't have buyers, and apparently we are big-time buyers.
Yeah, this is a very addiction is a very, very complex environment, but just addicting a young person of teenage years with fake pills that they think that is recreational to get high for a few hours, and poisoning them to death is two different stories. For your information, this is target to John. There are 18,000 known FBI individual that FBI is after them in United States last 4 years. 18,000. And this is known. Forget about the ones that are unknown. It's probably 10 times more. This is what happens when you have open borders without
lovely
any restrictions. Anyways, let's go back to our conversation here. Somebody reads this.
For example, should he so wish, he can pass his days in praise of God, and should he so desire, he can occupy himself with that which is other than him. He can light the candle of his heart with the flame of the love of God and become well a wisher of the world, or he can become an enemy of all mankind, or set his affections on worldly things. He can choose to be just or iniquitous. All these deeds and actions are under his own control, and he is therefore accountable for them.
So now this is clearly shows the practicality of the Holy Spirit, which is the instruction set for the well-being of humanity as a whole. So here, again, if you praise God, means how do you praise God? Is to adhere to his instruction set, which is the Holy Spirit. Whatever ethics for today is given to us. So here, or you can use the tools that exist, like capitalism, and basically go after materialism to a degree that you don't really care about causing harm to others, as long as is legal, the action that you do. So these are give you an example. For example, drugs usually after 15 to 18 years become generic. So what happens, the big pharmaceutical companies, they go and buy these startups, which they get some traction that compete against their patented drugs, and they just buy them and then shut them down just to keep the prices of their copyrighted pills that they make. So these are really key elements which is legal but is unethical. Now, how do you prevent this from happening is, again, should he wish to, he can pass his days in praise of God. That means follow Holy Spirit, lives by it, and should he be desired, he can occupy himself, which is other than him. That means God of materialism. If you adopt that, then anything goes. And this is what's happening in the world, because they're trying to eliminate ethics and God from every aspects of society, especially in the United States. Of course, Europe is already gone and churches are empty. Nobody is actually cares whether God exists or not. That's why you see the even populations are shrinking because of birth rate is so low. People are self-motivated and self-centered, where obviously, as Baha'u'llah mentions, to his flock to marry so the offspring would bring mention of God on earth. So these are the key elements where the more you move toward materialism, the more these basics of the incremental survival of civilization gets harmed. So here you have, again, he can become an enemy of all mankind or set his affections on worldly things. As you see, we discussed, for example, raw material for fentanyl. Now, is production of it legal? Of course it is. Is shipping of it is legal? Yes, of course it is. But a lot of times, they know the communism or socialism around the world, especially in third world countries, they know economically they cannot corrupt or basically win over United States. The only way they can do this is to really corrupt it from a cultural perspective. And they're doing a fantastic job, and we're sleeping on the job. So this liberation theology that started in mid-60s seeped into education, and now it has seeped into high schools, that the poor countries are poor because poor people do not enter politics and take advantage of it by rich people. So the rich people are the source of the problem. They don't understand, if rich people won't create jobs, nobody would eat. So these are really very fundamental aspects where Baha'i religion dictates protection of the capital and protection of labor. This is completely opposite of socialism, which promotes ownership of production to the state. So people don't own things. That's what socialism is. Now, majority of people don't even understand what socialism is. And we have experimented, by the way, in the United States with socialism during the first wave of immigrants that came into actually Quebec, and during the North American incursion, where they had communal living, and majority of them actually died from hunger and famine and so on and so forth, because there was no ownership. The minute they started to divide the land, give it to each individual for ownership, then the whole community flourished. And that's how we get the Thanksgiving, of course, to the detriment of turkeys, but in reality, we already experimented in the United States with socialism, and miserably people lost their lives. But nobody remembers this. So this is really the key. This disease that came in through liberation theology, then they started to make branches of it. And they seeped into Ivy schools, and people are poor is because of the fault of the rich. Otherwise, if you take all the wealth that is concentrated on the top and distributed into every person, the standard of living is not going to get higher by much, because the rich people, they cannot consume the material that they accumulate. There's the ones that are creating the jobs. Now, the problem is that this balance, there is no equitable distribution of the capital. That's what the problem is. But opportunity for everyone to create something and take benefit from it should always be, and that's what the Baha'i religion promotes. So it's a regulated capitalism, or regulated free market is what Baha'i religion says. Shoghi Effendi mentions actually communism was a necessary disease to get rid of the superstition that existed in the world. But nonetheless, it's a disease. Once that process of education and disbursement of knowledge around the world occurs, communism has no place. And we see this today. There are only maybe a couple of countries that are left, and they're living in misery because of the choices that they made in terms of applying communism. So the question is whether the rich people apply the resources they have to create jobs, or just put it into an environment which is non-productive. And that's really the key. That's what makes the economy revolve. You cannot have 3 dinners because you're a rich person. And even if you have 100 cars, you can't drive them anyways. So these are really key elements. The key is how do you distribute the process equitably is through taxation. And this is what progressive taxation is, what Baha'i religion promotes. And of course, inclusion of workers in the profits of the company, and all those things that regulates the capitalism, the only tool that we currently have. But there is no alternative to it currently. All right. Let's look. Any other comments on this?
Well, the thing is, you talk about, I guess, pharmaceutical companies and all that. It seems to me that the solution to that is for people to be educated and to pay attention to who they elect, and make sure that if you're going to elect somebody to office, that they have some sort of moral bearing, that
Exactly.
they cannot be corrupted by being bribed, or somebody say, well, I tell you what, if I pay you so much money, you will pass laws that will benefit me and not benefit society. But
Just for your information, just current government passed a law of most favored nation for pharmaceuticals. They just passed this to other countries. Now, what was happening is that United States, quote unquote, was funding all the R&D of all pharmaceutical manufacturers because we could afford to pay those prices. Now, the law that passed, a drug that was $110 would drop to $30, and the same drug that was sold in UK for $5 becomes $30 also. So their cost, so because pharmaceutical companies were shortchanging Americans for decades and decades, and the way they did it is they were funding those representatives of the Congress to keep it that way. Now you have administration, they say no more abuse of Americans. Now, most favored nation. For them to survive, those pharmaceutical companies, they have to almost quadruple the prices they sell, and they cannot sell any drug in anywhere in the country lower than they sell it to United States. Otherwise, they're going to be banned from US market and be heavy tariffs. So now, again, the government is trying to make sure that we're not the recipient or funding of all the pharmaceutical companies, because we can. So these are really the key elements that where you're talking about equitable justice, this is what is happening, that pharmaceutical companies have no longer the power to influence the election process to a degree to make their own demands basically be satisfied. So you see the system itself, the funds itself, if you donate to an organization for whatever basically branch of help that they want to do, whether it's alleviating human suffering around the world, or feeding the children, or so on and so forth, and those same companies take part of the money they receive and funnel it back to the representative in the Congress, it's a very interesting closed loop. And it's happening today. And it's legal, by the way. So you see, the minute you take God out of it and ethics out of the system, whatever system it is, we have a republic, basically. Obviously, United States is a republic. So this issue occurs when the government divorces themselves from corporations that are siphoning capital out of the system. So now you see inflation would come down dramatically. Is because we're not funding world research on drugs. Anyways, so let's read on. So this is the system of election. That's why actually even Abdul Baha in toward end of 19th century, he was mentioning system of constitutional monarchy, and the way that people elect get elected to the government, the minute they get elected, they would divorce themselves from their own party. Now, what is happening today? In Congress, everybody votes with the party. That means they have no vote, they have no power, because they all vote the same way. So you see, they're violating Holy Spirit. They're violating mandate of basically parliamentary system that Abdul Baha promoted. So they only responsible for all humanity when they get elected, and they only fear God, not the pharmaceutical company that's going to fund their next election, which is happening today. So these, again, as we saw, all living beings are integrated the same way. Baha'i doctrine has a complete solution, and you can't just apply portion of it and expect results. So the process has to be followed and is fully intertwined. And the roadmap of a moral society has been given to us in writing and is authenticated. So these are really the key. That's why Baha'is should not involved in politics, because they, all of them, whether left or right, they violate the doctrine of Baha'i religion. So what we need to do is create a movement within the Baha'i religion to create those entities that competes with current systems that exist, whether it's for left or right. And that's how you can change society, is by including the solution into the brains of people, that they would reject people that only practice for material gain, to be elected to be custodian of well-being of other human beings within the world as well as their own country. But I see this, unfortunately, many Baha'is migrate toward left or toward the right, and they're all is because of lack of education of Baha'i system. You would never associate yourself with left or right, because both of them are wrong and needs to be corrected. And the only way you can correct it is to create that movement of the ideology of Baha'i religion. And that's how the world would get corrected. All right. Any other comments so we can read the rest?
Thank you so much. You mentioned, Jarabi Hakim, about that even the Baha'i become involved, you know, is, I can see it, I cannot say here, you know, that, and complete, they're in the politics and they're side of the right or left, you know, and whatever in the writing, they said Baha'i not involved in the politics, but unfortunately, they're immaturity. I don't know. I'm not sure trying to fix it, this part, but is, I don't know, the world is upside down, everything, you know. Anyway, sorry, and I mistake your time. Always I thought 8 o'clock Chicago time, and then I turn on 8, and your time was 1 hour different. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm so sorry. All right.
It's all right.
Can I just add one thing? I have a series of I think it's SASB clergy meetings, and I think it's a very good idea for Baha'is to look at what's happened to Christianity in America, because it's become politicized and so on. And my point being this, is that you have the wrong stats for that. 60% of people in their survey, and they have sociologists that have done the surveys, actually relate to being Christians. But the way that is divided up, they have a graph which shows non-participants and so on in different like Protestants and so on. But the one thing I wanted to mention to you, that you shouldn't, like, we needn't be misguided, because actually what's happened is Christians have become more group oriented rather than rather than denomination, through things like those people that believe in certain issues that are going on in your society. So Christianity isn't fading. It's just that what is happening, people are forming groups within the traditional denominations of Christianity, and that's why it looks like that, But I have sent that also. I've sent a whole series of that for anybody's interest that really wants to have a look at facts and graphs, and from those sessions of that organisation. And these are all clergy, and they came together to consult about the things that we're talking about here, but within their, their clergymen, and they're concerned, particularly about authoritarianism. Anyway, look, I have sent them, if anyone's interested, to update so that you can get a bit of picture of the geographics and what's really happening at the grassroots of your country from a perspective of the research being done by this group of clergy. And it's across all denominations. I have sent that also to Jeremiah. I often do that because I come to these sessions and then I hear all this and I think, well, and then I research. So it's there available for anybody interested. Thank you.
All right. So let's read one more.
All right.
Go ahead.
But another question arises. Man's condition is one of utter helplessness and absolute poverty. All might and power belong to God alone, and man's exaltation and abasement depend on the will and purpose of the Most High. Thus it is said in the Gospel that God is like a potter, who makes one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor. Now the dishonored vessel has no right to reproach the potter, saying, "Why did you not make me a precious cup that would be passed from hand to hand?" The meaning of these words is that souls occupy different stations. That which occupies the lowest station of existence is like the mineral, has no right to object, saying, "O God, why have you denied me the perfections of the plant?" Likewise, the plant has no right to protest that it has been deprived of the perfections of the animal realm. And similarly, it is not befitting for the animal to complain of the want of human perfections. No, all these things are perfect in their own degree, and must pursue the perfections of that degree. As we have said previously, that which is inferior in rank has no right or qualification to aspire to the station and perfections of that which is superior, but must progress within its own degree.
All right. So here again, why they say man's condition is one of the utter helplessness and absolute poverty. That means that if you take the revelation of God through successive revelation, we would be no better than animals. Even if materially we progress, the harm that would cause without the ethics, and which is source of it is from the Holy Spirit. Source of it is from successive infusion of the manifestations of God to bring society to the next level of the ethics. Of course, within the socioeconomic system of the time. And clearly, without it, man would be no better than animal. That means that they would not have any instructions in terms of achieving a just and fair society. So this process of sending manifestations of God is the power that is given to humanity to redeem itself. So, and this is the purpose of the creation, is to know God and to create heaven on earth, through application of the Holy Spirit. So here again, the God creates different classes of being within the society, and they're all integrated, and no one can actually profess that they should have been different. And of course, the only species that have this potential to recognize God is humans with their own free will. So this question of the station is the important part here. Now, if Holy Spirit or these successive revelation wasn't there, man would be no better than animal and would not be responsible. So there wouldn't be any good or bad, because man would operate as its instinctive mode to survive. That's why we never blame a serpent because of the way that the serpent behaves, or a bear or a wolf, because that's in their nature and that's how they propagate. And they have no control over it. It's through evolutionary process they became these species that only operate with this instincts, basically. So here again, this process in terms of why God is just or not, in terms of what is happening in the world today. Why God didn't create people that couldn't cause harm. You see? So why couldn't God create all people to be noble?
Isn't this place meant for us to get tested and also have a choice?
But that's the whole key. It's a free will. That's really the key.
I mean, is this place really meant for us to actually be happy? Like every single thing that we receive is a result of nerve impulse, which is just a different form of pain. It's just one is not perceptible, one is more perceptible. I mean, tell me, does anyone like going to the bathroom every day? Is that something fun to everybody? Like, even if you're the most healthy human being in the world, you're always going to have to deal with sickness at some point, right?
Yeah,
we all have to deal with some sort of inconvenience, even if you're not sick. Some people, they have issues with the clothing not fitting right, or the clothing not sitting right, or something just not placed correctly that they need to keep moving around. There's always something wrong with people, no matter how perfect their world is. So I'm just wondering if everything, no matter how pampered someone is, there's always going to be a problem that someone has to face. Maybe this world wasn't meant to have no problems. Maybe it was meant exactly for problems to exist, so we learn how to deal with them.
Well, what we're discussing is materialism. The reason you see ups and downs that occurs, or healthy or unhealthy, these are sources of once you're detached from material things, you accept them as normal, as a process of being a living and being able to exercise your free will not to cause harm to other people.
So to be clear, is it that you're more resilient to these issues, or you just don't notice them as issues at all because you just deal with them in a way that makes them a non-issue? How is it?
Well, this is the whole point. Everybody, when they have a silver spoon in their mouth and already funded, they will not be able to experience and augment their attributes because they're not exposed to different ups and downs that normal people experience. But you can be far more richer spiritually if you get exposed and learn through this process of how to behave when you're faced with elements that you have no control on.
So I have a question about that, though, because a lot of people will agree that necessity is the mother of invention. And I understand this idea that materialism has been viewed as, well, sorry, I'm not going to say that. I understand this idea that material solutions, people believe that we can find material solutions to problems. And that's the way to resolve issues, is through buying something to fix something rather than finding a solution that doesn't necessarily result in the same outcome. What I mean to say is, if we have a world that's built on things that continue to break, respectfully, all the trinkets that we buy, most of them break after 5 years at best. And we're spending money on things that are just built to break. And there's this idea of planned obsolescence. So I'll buy a product from Apple or from Microsoft or whatever company that is around today. I'm going to buy a product from them, and it's very clear that it's planned to be obsolete. At some point, they're going to sunset the product, and I can no longer use it. The item I'm using now to communicate with is going to be sunset at one point because the manufacturer will not support it any longer. I'm just saying as a point that we don't have this culture of spiritually guided. We, again, going back to the very beginning of our session today, we are connected to all things. It's not that view. It's like a conveyor belt where things end up on one side and they fall off the other, and you keep buying and you keep throwing away. Like everything is disposable. And ultimately speaking, we're treating people like they're disposable. This is our world.
Consumerism.
Huh?
Consumerism. It depends on your focus. If you're so totally unconscious and you don't know that you consist of a dual reality, both a soul and a body, then of course your focus is going to be totally riveted on body and material things. So, things breaking and so on and so forth. We're in a particular time when consumerism, like you are being told every day with millions of ads, that if your so-and-so is broken, then you have to go off to the next agency and go and get a new one, and you'll get a discount. So my point is that's around consumerism, John. And, I hear your point, but I think that's one of the things we're here together to do, is to pioneer and explore our reality, both our material reality, but more importantly, the one denied, the real part of us, which is our other reality, which is spiritual in its essence. And that may not want to take its whole existence up and being caught up in consumerism is my point. And I have one last thing that I'll leave you go, John. I just want to talk about station, because I have heard so many people, Baha'is as well, very concerned about this thing about station. So when you finish, John, I'd love just to add to that. Thank you.
Sure. So this idea about having material solutions to fix our problems, inevitably we all need to, as we are in a world with material things, use material things. I think that the way that we perceive material things and their use in our life, the idea of finality and the idea of, again, fungibility of things, I think that our view as to how we are attached to things versus how we treat things will greatly be different. So this idea of this, in this quote that about the pot, I'm sorry, was it a pot that we were reading about? The potter making a vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor. I understand that there's this difference of station, which I know Sharon was going to talk about, but I also think from a different perspective that there's also the way that we make things, the way that we hold things, the way that we use things. There are people who will buy cars and treat them in a way that they'll drive them until the wheels fall off. And there are people who buy cars and mistreat them and maybe never even see the second trade-in. But let's just say they go through cars like every 2 years they need a new car. Clearly, there's this idea of freedom that we all have in one sense, but there's also this idea of excess and decadence. And clearly, when we talk about what is balance, there surely is balance, but we just are in the midst of something that's not normal. We're not living in a time where we had 100 years ago the same type of conditions. Everything is always changing. So we don't really have some other person's wise decisions to rely upon. And because we're moving and we're moving and we're moving, things are changing so drastically. It's even more valuable that we look at these laws that God has given us as this anchor in a storm of change. And the storm of change isn't per se a bad thing. It's just that the capacity to do great good is also rivaled by the capacity to do great evil. And if we can acknowledge the great good that we can do with the availability of resources and means to do something, like Mr. Hakim just referred a moment ago to this idea of those raised with a silver spoon and not having a need to do, I think that the most amicable person, the most valuable people in our society are those with means that are putting their utmost effort to do something to help others. So these people, mentioning those with silver spoons that are not having challenges that are facing them in their life to live a basic life, they have the opportunity, and I will say they have the duty to do their utmost to expend their efforts, if they have strength, if they have energy, to help and assist others. So there's this morality, I believe, that we're taught as Baha'is, as people who are trying to follow this law of God, that yes, we have choice. And if there are these circumstances where we have the choice to do and we choose not to, that is far greater in evil than those who wish they could do, but they cannot. And being so, I'm saying we live right now in an age of ability, an age of immense energy. The ability for me to travel anywhere in the world is at my fingertips. I can just go on a computer and immediately get a plane ticket if I so desire. And likewise, if I so desire, I can go and help a lot of people. And I think that myself, those watching, especially those who have the means to be watching today, it's very likely everyone here has means to help others. And it's, I feel, a challenge that we all have to understand that, yes, there are people who are helpless, there are people who are poor, but there are also people who have been given the blessing by God to be ones to bring those out of helplessness, out of that poverty, and give them the light of these teachings that we have, just as much as we can assist them to continue to have access to those teachings.
All right. Thank you very much. I think we came to the end of the session. Let's have a volunteer for the closing prayer, please.
Sharon, would you like to say a prayer?
Oh, okay. I will. Okay. Thou seest me, O my God, bowed down in lowliness, humbling myself before thy commandments, submitting to thy sovereignty, trembling at the might of thy dominion, fleeing from thy wrath, entreating thy grace, relying upon thy forgiveness, shaking with awe at thy fury. I implore thee with a throbbing heart, with streaming tears and a yearning soul, and in complete detachment from all things, to make thy lovers as rays of light across the realms, and to aid thy chosen servants to exalt thy word, that their faces may turn beauteous and bright with splendor, that their hearts may be filled with mysteries, and that every soul may lay down its burden of sin. Guard them then from the aggressor, from him who has become a shameless and blasphemous doer of wrong. Verily, thy lovers thirst, O my Lord, Lead them to the wellspring of bounty and grace. Verily, they hunger. Send down upon them thy heavenly table. Verily, they are naked. Robe them in the garments of learning and knowledge. Heroes are they, O my Lord. Lead them to the field of battle. Guides are they. Make them to speak out with arguments and proofs. Ministering servants are they. Cause them to pass round the cup that brimmeth with the wine of certitude. O my God, make them to be songsters that carol in fair gardens. Make them lions that couch in the thickets, whales that plunge in the vasty deep. Verily, thou art he of abounding grace. There is none other God save thee, the mighty, the powerful, the ever bestowing. Abdul Baha.
Thank you very much. We reached the end of the session. Have a good night, and hopefully see everyone next week, same time. Good night.